this is the Zoho CRM Developer Series where we'll be talking all things developer and API. So this is the final part of the 5-part series. So in today's session, we'll be discussing the Composite API and the Bulk Write API. So a quick recap for all the new joiners of what happened in the previous sessions. In the first session, we covered what a basic API means, what Zoho CRM APIs are, the different categories of Zoho CRM APIs, and how authorization is handled for these APIs using the OAuth 2.0 protocol and the various CRUD operations. And in session 2, we discussed Zoho CRM's Python SDK, and we discussed how you can use Python SDK's helper classes to make API calls and integrate your application easily. We also discussed API credit calculation and concurrency. So we discussed how API credits are applied, how credits are consumed for each API call, how concurrency is applied to the APIs, and how rate limiting is done from Zoho CRM. And in the third session, we discussed in detail the search and COQL APIs, which is nothing but the query API. And we also discussed the differences between these two APIs and when you should use which API. And in the last session, which was the fourth session, we discussed bulk read API and notification API and how you can achieve data synchronization between Zoho CRM and an external legacy system using these two APIs. Now, coming to today's agenda, we will be discussing Composite API and Bulk Write API. Now, coming to the first one, Composite API. So what does composite mean? Composite simply means combining. So in Composite API, you can combine up to 5 API requests in a single API call. So when do you have to use this? For example, let's say you have the need to perform a group of operations together. For example, you want to create a lead, and as soon as the lead is converted, lead is created, you want to convert it. So in that case, you can use the Composite API. Also, when you want to save up on credits, because you can combine 5 API requests, you can easily save up on the credits. For example, when you want to convert a lead and you make a single separate API call to convert a lead, it will consume 5 API credits. Whereas if you use the Composite API to create a lead as well as convert the lead in the same Composite API call, it will consume only about 2 credits. So how is credit calculated? So for example, okay. Another advantage of using Composite API is that you can roll back an entire transaction. Like I said, this API involves sub requests. So you can have up to 5 sub requests. Let's take this example of creating a lead and converting it. So you want to only convert the lead only when it is created properly. For example, when you're trying to insert a lead and there is an error in the input body, then there is no point in converting that lead. So in that case, you can choose to roll back the entire transaction. So when that rollback happens, only 1 credit will be consumed. And similarly, you have 5 sub requests and all the sub requests are successful, then only 2 credits will be consumed. And let's say a rollback does not happen, and even in that case, only 1 credit will be consumed. So as you can see, you can use Composite API and really save up on the credits when there is a need to perform a group of operations. And another advantage of using Composite API is that it reduces the round trip time. So what is a round trip time? The time taken for a request to reach the server and for the server to send a response back. This is called the round trip time. So because you are sending, a group of requests and you get a response, clubbed together, you reduce the round trip time. And you can also achieve a single database transaction using the rollback key. And you can also choose to execute all the sub requests in parallel. Now, the type of executions that you can do using this Composite API. One is sequential execution and the other one is parallel execution. So in sequential execution, all the sub requests will be executed sequentially. That is, first sub request is executed, followed by the second, followed by the third, and so on. In parallel execution, all the sub requests get executed parallelly. So you can choose to do this in a single transaction or without a transaction. So we'll talk about all this in the upcoming slides. Now, in sequential execution, I told you about having, doing the job in a single transaction. So when you choose to choose the without transaction execution type of execution, here you give parallel execution as false because this is a sequential execution, and you also choose the rollback on fail as false, which means even if one or more sub requests fail, you do not roll back the entire transaction. Again, you can also in sequential execution with transaction, here you give the rollback on fail as true. So in this case, Only when all the sub requests are true will the composite API will execute in a single transaction. So even if one or more sub requests fail, the entire other request will be rolled back. So this is about sequential execution. So parallel execution, like I said, by parallel we mean all the sub requests execute in parallel. So here, because all the sub requests are executing parallelly, you cannot choose to have a rollback. So here rollback on fail will be false. Now, let's say you have even in parallel execution, you've given the parallel execution key as true, and you have a series of sub requests. Let's say there is one sub request that depends on another sub request. For example, you have sub request one and you have sub request two. So this second sub request is still dependent on the first sub request. Let's say you want sub request 2 uses some part of data from the response of sub request 1. In this case, these two sub requests will be executed only sequentially, even though you have chosen parallel execution. So simply put, all the dependent requests will be executed sequentially, even though you have given parallel execution as true. So let's just try out these APIs. So this is Postman. So here I have our collection here. So this is Zoho CRM REST API collection. So you can just search for Zoho CRM Developer here, and then you have our public collection. So you can fork our collection from here. And as you can see, we have different folders for authorization and all the public versions of APIs in Zoho CRM. So here I have already set up my client here. So for today, I will be using the self client. So here I have set up my environment with all the necessary details for client ID, client secret, etc. So today we'll be trying out the V6 APIs. So under V6, we have the folder called Composite API. So here I have an example. This is the input body of the Composite API. So this is the post request. This is the API domain, and this is the endpoint. So under authorization, as you can see, I have my access token as bearer token, and this is the input body. So here, I'll be choosing the without transaction sequential flow. So for this, rollback on fail, I've given false, and then parallel execution is also false because this is the sequential execution. So this is the composite request array. So here I have sub requests. So I have about 3 sub requests over here. So for easy identification, we have the key called sub request ID so that it is easier for us to find out which sub request has been executed. So in the first sub request, I'm using the post method, and this is my API endpoint, which means I am inserting a lead in the leads module. So this is the input body for inserting a lead. So here I've given the last name. Again, I have another sub request, and this tries to update the lead that I just created. So this sub request 2 is dependent on the data from sub request 1. So here, like I said, because it is dependent on sub request 1, I am traversing the JSON using the dot operator. So 1 is the sub request ID. So in the response of sub request 1, the response is available in $.data. So at the 0th index, I have the details key and I also have the ID in the response. So what happens is this sub request fetches this ID from the response of sub request 1, and then it updates that record. So here I'm updating the last name of that lead. Again, in the third sub request, I have a get sub request here. So here it tries to get the lead that was recently updated. So here this sub request 2 was the lead that was recently updated. So here I'm traversing to the sub request ID followed by the data at 0th index, and inside data we have the details key, and inside the details key we have the ID. So I am taking this ID from the second sub request and I am getting that lead. So here, because I'm getting a specific lead, the fields parameter is mandatory. So I'm getting the last name, company, and email fields of the lead. So let's just try it. Okay. So I have a 200 OK here. So the composite request was a success, which means the composite request has executed. Again, as you can see, I have status code 201, which is nothing but which indicates that the record was created. So this is my ID. Like I said, under details, you have the under data. At the 0th index, you have the details key. Under details key, you have the ID. So this is the ID of the record that was created. And in my second sub request, it fetches this ID and it updates. So the record is updated. Again, I'm trying to get the same record that was updated recently in the third sub request. So as you can see, this is the third sub request, and the company email and last name field. So as you can see, this is the ID of the record. So I have the last name with the updated last name. So this is about without transaction. By without transaction, we mean that you do not choose to roll back your transaction. That is why rollback on fail is false. Now, coming to sequential with transaction. So here I have given rollback on fail is true. So I have the same input body here. So here what happens is when one of the sub requests fails, the entire transaction will be rolled back. For example, let's say I have the first sub request where I've created a lead, and in the sub request I'm trying to update it, and in the third sub request I'm trying to get the uh, record that was recently updated. So here I have the ID, I have the email field, and then I have given the company field, which means I'm updating the company field of the record that I created, and then I'm trying to get this. So let's just try it. So I'm getting a 400 bad request. So as you can see, mandatory not for. So when I'm trying to create a lead, last name is a mandatory field. So the read itself is not created. So all the other sub requests will not be processed. So as you can see, for the second sub request, the code is processing stop, and also for the third sub request, the code is processing stop. This is because request 2 and 3 are dependent requests. So when the first request itself is not processed, the other sub requests will not be executed. So a rollback has happened. So similarly, let's say you have created a lead, you're trying to update a lead, and then you're trying to convert it. So when you've updated that lead, and there is a error in while updating the lead, then what happens is, and you've also given rollback on fail as true, in that case the created lead itself will not be created, so entire transaction will be rolled back. So this is the use case of having a rollback performed using the Composite API. Coming to parallel execution. So parallel execution is nothing but where all the sub requests execute parallelly. So this is a very straightforward approach. So here I've given rollback on fail as false, and I've given the parallel execution Boolean value to be true. So again, I have the series of sub requests here, and then all the sub requests execute parallelly. So we're done with the Composite API. Next is the bulk write API. So in the last session 4, we discussed the bulk read API. So bulk read is when you want to export a large set of data from Zoho CRM to another system. So the opposite is the bulk write API, where you'll be importing a large set of data from another system into Zoho CRM. So of course you can use the create records API, but you have the limit of 200 records per API call. Now when you're talking about thousands of data records, thousands of records, in that case you'll be using the bulk write API. So like I said, you can deal with a import up to 25,000 records in a single API call using this bulk write API. Now, because we're dealing with a large volume of data, this is an asynchronous API. So by asynchronous, I mean when you initiate a bulk write job, just right away you don't import all the records into Zoho CRM. So this API schedules a job, and once that job is completed, the import is complete. So this is what an asynchronous API means. And then because we're dealing with huge data, it also consumes about 500 API credits per API call. Now, like I said, the advantage is that when you're dealing with a large volume of data, you can use the bulk write API. So a single API call allows you to import up to 25,000 records. Now, when you're importing, you can also insert, update, or upsert the data. So for example, you already have imported data into the leads module. Now there has been an update in your external system, and you want to make sure that the same data is also there in Zoho CRM. In that case, you only want to update data, or you want to upsert data. So in that case, even that is possible using the bulk write API. How does it work? So first is for you to import data into Zoho CRM, there has to be data somewhere. So this is where your CSV comes in. So you need to have a CSV file. I'm sorry. So you need to have a CSV file with all the data that you want to import into Zoho CRM for a module. Let's say you want to import data into the leads module. So you need to have a CSV that contains the details of all the leads. And then what happens is you want to upload your file. So you have to upload this file to Zoho's file system. So you use the upload file API, and then you zip this CSV, and then you upload this CSV to Zoho files. And then once this file is uploaded, you get a file ID. Now using this file ID, you create a bulk write job. So generally from the UI, when you try to import or export, there is something called field mapping, which means the data in your CSV has to be mapped with the right fields in Zoho CRM. So for example, you have a last name field in your CSV file. So the system has to know which field has to be mapped with the last name field, which field in Zoho CRM has to be mapped with the last name field in your CSV file. So you give all that details in this bulk write job API. And then once this API is, once you hit send, this API will schedule a job. So you can, this API allows for polling and callback. For example, you create a bulk write job and it is scheduled. The job is in progress or the job is completed, or, so you have a status. So when you want to check the status of the job, you can use the check job status API. So polling and callback. So polling, like I said, you can use the check job status API with the job ID to see what the status of the job, if it's completed or if it's still in progress. And also we have the option of callback. Let's say your code execution, your code flow in such a way that your code starts execution. It just creates the bulk write job, and then it stops execution. So again, it restarts only when there is, a callback. For example, only when the job is, completed, you get a response, you get a callback in the callback URL, and then your code starts executing again. So this is one flow where you'll be using the callback option. And again, there is another kind of flow where your code schedules bulk write job, and then it waits until you get a response. So in that case, you can use the polling option using the check job status API. So once the job is completed, you can go ahead and download the result. So you want to see which data was imported into Zoho CRM. So you can use the download result API that will have another zip file containing the CSV of all the records that were imported into Zoho CRM. So let's just try this out. So again, coming to our Zoho CRM API collection in Postwell, we have the bulk APIs and we also have the bulk write API. Now, the advantage of bulk write API is that you can combine multiple CSVs in one zip file. So this is the upload file API. So here, the use case is that I have to import data into the leads module, and this leads module also has a subform. So let's just see the CSV that I've prepared. So this is the simple CSV that I've prepared for the leads module. So here I have the company, first name, last name, email, phone, and mapping ID field. So this is the CSV I've created for the leads file, and I also have one for the uh, subform. So alternate address is a subform in my leads module that has the field, state, and city. Now, as you can see, there is a field called mapping ID here that has the details of the leads. And even in my leads CSV, there is something called the mapping ID field. So why do you need this? So every subform record has a parent record. For example, there is a alternate address subform in one of the leads. The subform also has records. So while you're importing, the system needs to know which subform record belongs to which lead record. So the parent-child relationship must be maintained. So in order to do that, the system needs a common field between both CSVs. So that common field is the mapping ID. You can have the name as you want. So here, for convenience sake, I've given the mapping ID here. So mapping ID here, I've given lead one. When you go to the alternate address so when you go to the alternate address, here lead one is the mapping ID, which means these two subform records belong to the lead one. So I have my CSVs here. So I'm going to zip them both. I have the zip file here. So I have to upload this here. I have the archive zip file here. So I'm uploading this. And then this requires your org ID and the feature called bulk write in the header. So here is this is the post request. This is the request URL. And then I have the file here. Okay. Okay, invalid auth token. So my token has expired. So I'll just, I have the token, upload success. So this is the file ID. So I'm copying this. So now I have prepared my CSV. I have uploaded the zip file containing the CSV files for the leads and the subform records. And this is the create bulk rate job API. So here operation is insert because I'm inserting records into Zoho CRM. In case you're updating or upserting, you can change this value here. This is the callback. So this is the callback URL where I'll be getting the status of the bulk write job once it is completed. So the method is post, and then in the resource array is where I have my field mapping. So type is data, module is API name leads. So in the resource array, the first object should always be that of the parent. So here leads is the parent. So I should include the leads module here. So the API name of the parent is leads. This is the file ID. And then this is the name of the file. So leads.csv was the name of the file that I uploaded. And then in field mapping here, for the API name company, which means for the company field in Zoho CRM, I want the data in index 0 in my CSV to be mapped. So the data 0 in my CSV is, so at the 0th index, I have the company field. So I'm telling Zoho CRM to map the company field in Zoho CRM with the data in this index. So this is done. And then the last name field at index 2, 0, 1, 2. And then I have the first name in index 1. So index 1. And then I have the email and phone fields here. Next is the subform. So here the API name of the subform. As you all know, subform is also treated as a module. So you need to give the API name of the subform here. So I have to give the file ID. And this is the file name of the subform CSV. And in field mappings, I have given state and city at the indexes 0 and 1. Now, I told you about having a common field. So here the API name will be parent ID because we are using a subform. The API name should be parent ID. And then the parent column index 5, which means for the parent ID to match with the parent, I'm giving the parent ID with the parent column index of 5. So in my leads table, I'm giving this, so which means the subform record should be matched with the lead given in this column. So this is the fifth column, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it should be matched with this column. So this is the common field. So I'm giving the parent ID field here. So let's just hit send. So I have success response here, which means a job is created. So I can use the get status API. You can see the job is in progress. So because this is an asynchronous API, it takes some time. So I also had given the callback URL here. So this is the callback URL. So once that job is completed, I also, so here, as you can see, the job is completed. So I get a response here. So let's just try and poll here once more. So as you can see, the job is completed here. So in the file object, you can see added count is 3. So which means 3 leads were added. And coming to the subform, 3 subform records were added. So you have the same content in your callback URL. The total count is 3, added count is 3 in the leads module from the leads CSV. And then for the subform, the total count is 3 and added count is 3, which means out of the 3 records that were there in the CSV, all 3 are added. So let's just see if it is created in the UI. So I have the 3 leads created here. So I have the alternate address subform here that has the state and city over here. So this is how we've used bulk write API to bulk import data into the leads module that also has a subform. Let's say you have also a multi-select lookup field. So how does it happen? So even multi-select lookup field is considered a module. So you have a link whenever there is a multi-select lookup field, you have a linking module. So you need to have a CSV file uh, with the linking module's name, and the linking module should have the details of the lookup fields. So for example, you have a linking module. You have the leads module. You have something called the listings module, and in leads, listings is a multi-select lookup field. So what happens is there is a multi-select lookup linking module created called leads versus listings. So your CSV should be of that of the leads versus listings. So in this, you have to give the related leads as well as the related listings. So this is how you can use, you can bulk import data to a multi-select lookup field. So again, the input body is going to be very similar. So how we gave for the subform here, you need to have another object here for the multi-select lookup field. So a few things to note about bulk write API is that your zip file can contain multiple CSV files, and the max size is 25 MB. The catch is that you can upload only one zip file. So for example, if you want to bulk import data into the leads module that also has a subform, in that case, you'll be zipping two CSV files in one zip file. And then these are the supported delimiters for the CSV file. We support comma, semicolon, colon, and the pipe. And then if your module has any required fields, if you've set any required fields in your module, you have to make sure that all the required fields are also included in the input. And then when you have lookup fields, for example, in contacts, accounts is a default lookup field. So you want to use your import data to that lookup field also, you have to use the dot operator. So here the format would be field API name dot parent field API name. So for example, in contacts, account name dot account name will give you the name of the account that the contact is associated with. So your CSV should have a column that says account name dot account name. So this is how you can bulk import data to lookup fields. Again, like I said, you can import a maximum of 25,000 records in a single API call using the bulk write API, and maximum column headers will be 200. So which means 200 fields. So in your CSV, these are called fields or columns. So you can have a maximum of 200 column headers over here, which means you can bulk import data to up to 200 fields using the bulk write API. So this brings us to the end of the presentation.